The moment I drew the first line for my new fence, she appeared, smirking, arms crossed, like I'd just announced I was declaring war. "Really?" she said, her voice dripping with mockery. "You're building a fence there? That little strip of grass?" I froze for a second, surprised that someone could be this audacious about someone else's property plans. But I quickly realized this wasn't going to be a small disagreement. It was the beginning of a full-blown neighborhood battle. Her name was Marlene, the self-proclaimed queen of our block, who took it upon herself to monitor everyone else's property as if she had a personal investment. She had opinions about paint colors, garden layouts, even where mailboxes should go. But the fence, oh, the fence, was clearly the line she would not let me cross. She paced along the edge of my property, shaking her head, issuing a litany of advice that made it clear she didn't see my land as mine. "It's too tall. It'll block the sun." "It looks ridiculous," she insisted, as though my life's plans had no weight in her universe. I took a deep breath, trying to remain calm. I didn't want a war. I just wanted a simple fence for privacy and peace. But her tone, that sharp, patronizing tone, lit a spark in me I hadn't felt in years. There was a history here. Marlene had always believed she had the final word on what her neighbors could or couldn't do. Yet somehow I had decided she wasn't going to dictate my property anymore. So I did what she thought I wouldn't. I went home, measured every inch of my land meticulously, and drew up plans for a fence that wasn't just functional. It was a statement, 12 feet tall, sturdy, impenetrable, right on the property line. Every time I looked at the plans, I felt a thrill of rebellion. The fence wasn't just wood and nails, it was a declaration. My property, my rules. The next morning, I could see Marlene peering over the street corner, suspicious, ready to pounce with her usual criticism. I smiled quietly to myself, knowing the look on her face would be priceless when the first post went into the ground. And as I began digging, hammering and assembling, I realized this wasn't just about a fence. It was about standing up, about claiming space in a neighborhood that often felt like a minefield of judgments. Little did she know, her mocking would only fuel my determination. By the time I finished, the fence wouldn't just mark property lines. It would mark the end of her unsolicited interference. And for the first time in years, I felt a surge of pride mixed with anticipation. The confrontation was inevitable, and I was ready. By the time the sun peeked over the horizon, my 12-foot fence was half erected, each wooden plank a bold statement against interference. I could feel Marlene's eyes on me from across the street, her posture rigid, her face a mix of disbelief and irritation. She didn't wave. She didn't call out. She just stared, as if trying to summon some magical authority that could make me stop. But today, nothing she could say would bend me. This was my property, my choice, my stand. As I hammered the posts into the ground, neighbors began to emerge, curious about the audacious height and precision of the structure. Some offered approving nods, others whispered in disbelief. I caught snippets of conversation. "She's going to be furious," one neighbor muttered. Finally, someone standing up to her, another said. The undercurrent of tension was palpable, a mix of admiration and apprehension. But my focus never wavered. Each post I set was a silent message. Boundaries are to be respected, and mine would not be crossed. Around midday, the inevitable confrontation arrived. Marlene stormed down my driveway, heels clicking like a drumbeat of accusation. "What do you think you're doing?" she demanded, arms flailing. "This fence is outrageous. It blocks the view. It's going to lower everyone's property value." I paused, wiped sweat from my brow, and looked her in the eyes. "It's on my property," I said simply. "It's within my rights, and it's for my privacy." "That's it." Her face twisted in disbelief. "You can't just, this isn't fair," she screamed. But the fire in my chest burned brighter. I had anticipated her objections, memorized her arguments, and prepared my calm, firm responses. Every word I spoke carried the weight of certainty. "I'm done discussing it. This fence stays. You're welcome to consult a lawyer if you like." That's when she crossed the line, literally. Marlene stepped onto my land, pointing at my posts, threatening to call the city and the HOA. I took a step forward, blocking her path, and reminded her firmly, "You are on my property. Step back." Her shock was evident. For years, she had bullied neighbors with verbal jabs and thinly veiled threats, but no one had ever physically and legally stood their ground against her. Today I did. She retreated, muttering about complaints, inspections, and this isn't over. I returned to my work, each swing of the hammer heavier with resolve. The fence wasn't just a physical barrier, it was a symbol of boundaries, respect, and finally, defiance. And yet, as the day waned, I couldn't shake the feeling that Marlene wouldn't let this go quietly. The real battle was only beginning. By the next morning, word of my 12-foot fence had spread like wildfire through the neighborhood. Whispers, pointed glances, and curious stares followed me as I stepped outside. Marlene, predictably, was nowhere to be seen at first, but the air was thick, with the tension she always carried, like a storm cloud. I knew she was plotting, scheming her next move, but I wasn't intimidated anymore. This was no longer just about a fence. It was about showing her that I would not be intimidated, bullied, or manipulated. That day, I noticed something unexpected. Other neighbors approaching with cautious smiles and hesitant compliments. "We've wanted to do something similar for years," one elderly man admitted. "Finally, someone with the guts to just build it." A few nodded in agreement, offering small tips about posts, concrete, and maintenance. It was a quiet solidarity, but enough to remind me I wasn't entirely alone in this fight. The fence had become more than a boundary. It was a rallying point, a testament to standing up against someone who thrived on control. By mid-afternoon, Marlene returned, this time with a small entourage of neighbors. She had clearly convinced we're on her side. They gathered at the edge of my property, arms crossed, faces tight with disapproval. "This is outrageous," Marlene proclaimed, her voice rising. "It's completely unnecessary, and now the neighborhood looks divided." She pointed at the posts, towering over her like a monument to defiance. I stood firm, letting her words roll off like rain on concrete. The real surprise came when some of her entourage, neighbors, I'd spoken with before, stepped forward, gently but clearly siding with me. "I think it looks great," one woman said. "It's clean, functional, and honestly, it gives privacy to everyone who might want it." Marlene's face turned red, a mix of anger and humiliation. It was rare to see her lose control, and in that moment, I felt the balance of power shift. Determined not to let the tension escalate into chaos, I addressed the group calmly. "This fence is on my property. It is legal, safe, and built according to all regulations. You're all welcome to inspect it. But this ends any arguments about whether it should be here." Some muttered. Reluctantly, others nodded. But no one challenged me further. By evening, the fence was nearly complete. 12 feet of solid wood, perfectly aligned, casting a shadow that stretched across my yard. It was more than a barrier. It was a statement. Boundaries had been set, and respect would be demanded. Marlene, of course, still fumed, muttering about retaliation, inspections, and HOA meetings. But I had a quiet satisfaction. For the first time, I could see that her power wasn't absolute. And deep down, I knew the real confrontation was still coming. Marlene didn't forgive easily, and she certainly didn't forget. The morning sun hit the 12-foot fence like a spotlight, highlighting every perfectly aligned post and every taut plank. I walked along the property line, running my hands over the smooth wood, feeling a sense of accomplishment I hadn't realized I was capable of. Marlene, of course, was already hovering on the other side of the street, arms folded, lips pursed, like a storm waiting to break. I braced myself, knowing today might be the ultimate test of who controlled this neighborhood. She approached, marching with that determined, self-important stride she always used when she wanted to intimidate. "This isn't over," she hissed, her eyes darting between me and the fence. "You think this gives you the right to ignore the HOA? You think you can just—" I cut her off calmly, stepping onto the edge of my driveway, maintaining a safe but firm distance. This is my property. The fence is legal. I've followed every regulation. There's nothing more to discuss. Marlene's face flushed red with fury. But I noticed something different this time. Her usual entourage was quiet, some avoiding eye contact, others fidgeting uncomfortably. The balance had shifted. She no longer had a ready audience to validate her tantrums. Today, her words sounded hollow. I had prepared meticulously. Plans, permits, measurements, and my confidence radiated. She paused, seething, then made a final, futile attempt. "I'm calling the HOA! I'm calling the city!" "You can't—" I raised a hand. "You are welcome to do whatever you want. But I've done everything by the book. Any complaint will fail because this fence is fully compliant. You've been given your chance to resolve this civilly." "That's it!" Her jaw tightened. For the first time I saw hesitation in her eyes. The woman who had ruled the neighborhood with fear and sarcasm was unsure, uncertain, and powerless to act. Slowly, she turned and walked away, muttering threats that I knew would never materialize, and as she disappeared around the corner, I felt a sense of liberation wash over me. I stepped back, taking in the fence in its entirety. It was more than wood and nails. It was a monument to boundaries, respect, and standing firm against intimidation. Neighbors passed by, nodding in quiet acknowledgement, some even smiling as they glanced at the structure that had caused so much tension. For once, Marlene's influence had been checked, and the message was clear. This was my space, and my rules would be respected. As the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows over the yard, I realized something important. Victory wasn't about defeating Marlene. It was about reclaiming control of my own life and property, setting a boundary that no one could cross. The fence wasn't just a barrier, it was freedom. And with that thought, I finally allowed myself to relax, knowing the line had been drawn, and this time, it would not be crossed. Did you enjoy seeing me stand up to Marlene? Make sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any of my neighborhood battles. Drop a comment below. I want to hear your craziest HOA or neighbor stories. And don't forget to like this video if you love watching justice served the right way.